wonderful lecture tomorrow morning here in the sanctuary at 9:30. A little early, you get some ankles and locks. Ethnomusicologist Dr. Mark Kligman from UCLA talking about trends in Jewish music. And then tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, Pat Posey, the saxophonist, along with his trio, a violinist and a pianist, playing some amazing music. I just got a sample of Pat's playing a few minutes ago. We invite you to be part of all of these concerts and presentations. Tonight is very special, but before we do that, I want to thank the members of our congregation B'nai B'rith staff, the professional team, and our staff for making our congregation and our synagogue available to this wonderful festival that Maishi Bernstein and I have been planning not too long a time. But we felt like if we can just thread the needle and time it right, this festival will be a great welcoming back of in-person events. And anybody who was in the congregation last night for services really felt that joyous vibe as we celebrated Shabbat last night, the coming of Shabbat, with our choir and new music that was commissioned for our congregation. So it's very special to be together. Especially in celebration of Jewish music. Saturday night, it's time to reluctantly say farewell to Shabbat. So before our program of piano music, it's my pleasure to welcome a child of this congregation who grew up here. And David Childs is a cantorial student at Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. He's currently actually attending classes on Zoom. He should have been in Israel this semester, but his semester in Israel was postponed due to COVID. So he's able to be here with us tonight to lead us in an amazing Havdalah. The first part of it was composed by Zavel Zilberts, the great synagogue composer. And it's just a wonderful over-the-top setting of Hinei El Yeshuati, the first part of the Havdalah. He's accompanied by somebody who he has been working with since David was 3 years old, his first piano teacher, and the accompanist and pianist for our congregation, Heather Levin-White, is here. So Heather and David, please come in and lead us in Havdalah.
ישועתי אבטח ולא אבחר כי עוזי וזמרתיה אדוני ויהי לי לישועה ושאבתם מים בששון במעייני הישועה ושאבתם מים בששון ממעייני הישועה לאדוני הישועה על עמך ברכתך סלע על עמך ברכתך סלע אדוני צבאות עמנו משכב לנו אלוהי יעקב יעקב סלע ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר ושמחה וששון ויקר ליהודים הייתה אורה ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר ושמחה וששון ויקר ושמחה וששון ויקר ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen ay 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim borei minei v'samim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh Ay, day, da, 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 ay, da, 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 da. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל לעמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה. ברוך אתה אדוני המבדיל בין קודש לחול. לי די 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 המבדיל בין קודש לחול, חטאותינו ימחול. זרענו וכספנו ירבה כחול, וככוכבים בלילה. שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב. שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. Eliyahu. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimera ve'yameinu, Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi. Shavua Tov, everyone.
We have a beautiful evening of music ahead of us. Thank you, Heather. And to introduce tonight's guest artist, flew in all the way from New York, is my co-conspirator on this Zemmer Music Festival, Maishi Bernstein. Come on up and introduce Adam.
Put over there. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Shavua Tov. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight. For me, it's always moving when I hear David sing, and also with Mark. It's something I could think that, Mark, I don't know how you get through without crying, because I think a father, nothing better than having your son follow in your footsteps with a wonderful voice David has. And actually, David, where are you? He doesn't realize he was the instigator of all of this, because on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, Mark and I would drive down to Sinai Temple, and we'd spend 2 hours in the car going down and coming back, talking about classical music and comparing our thoughts about certain people. I think we settled on Yossi Björling as our favorite tenor and Alfredo Kraus. Those were the two we decided we really loved. But we had great discussions about music on the way down. And then eventually it led to, what about doing this festival? And I couldn't think of a better partner than Mark, because he's been so wonderful. He agreed with everything I said. So that, so that was great. Also, and to have David here, I mean, I said, we have to have David here. I just wanted to hear him sing. I just love it. Tonight's soloist, Adam, is a friend. One of the things I loved about doing this festival is I could bring in great musicians, and Adam is an honored musician. He's won awards, he's CDs, he's really top-notch, excellent, excellent player, but also he's a good friend, and it was a chance for me to bring in a friend as well. And I want to point out something really unusual. Adam's partner is Joel Weinberg, who was a student in my very first class in 1971 at UCSB when I came here. And Joel, he's only a few years younger than me. In those days, it wasn't that big. Always younger. But Joel became a very good friend. I became ill in the middle of my first quarter, and Joel came over and really took care of me during those weeks when I was ill. And I got to meet your parents, and his sister is here, Dina. And he actually met my parents in Ireland. We're one of the few of my friends who went to Ireland to meet my parents. So when Joel partnered with Adam, thank God he picked someone who can put up with Joel, for starters, but also wonderful person. And we've known each other all the time since day one. So to me, it's really is a pleasure. Adam has put together a wonderful concert for you, a variety of different Jewish composers. And he's going to talk a little bit about each piece as it goes along to give you a little bit of context for what he's playing. But you're in for an absolute delight tonight. I hope you will come back tomorrow night as well, when we have again we have a saxophone. I want something unusual in the instrumentation. And Pat Posey, who is, I don't know if Pat is here still, or yeah, he's over there, has put together a great evening of music, different. Especially, I want to mention just two of the composers, Edward Schuloff, who actually last night, the New York Philharmonic played him, which is a very rare occurrence. So he's a composer who's now coming into his own, who died in a concentration camp when he was only 48. And Edvard Moritz, who is an Austrian, right? Did I get it right? Austrian composer, we'll hear a world premiere of a discovered work that Pat has found. So tonight and tomorrow morning, we have a great lecture from a professor of ethnomusicology at UCLA. So we've put together a wonderful program. I hope you will love it. And now, please, a big hand for Adam Kent.
I am without mic, although. And thank you, Misha, for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you and to share some very diverse music this evening by composers of Jewish descent. I think one of the takeaways I hope you will have from this program are the many faces of Jewish cultures, Jewish assimilation, the Jewish contribution to the great stream of classical music in this country and in Europe as well. I'm going to begin with a group of pieces by Felix Mendelssohn. Apparently, Mendelssohn's father, Abraham Mendelssohn, is credited with the expression, "I spent the first third of my life as my father's son, and the second third as my son's father. I'd like to spend the last third as myself." But I think he was alluding to the fact that his father, Moses Mendelssohn, had been a prominent Jewish philosopher in 18th century Germany. By the time his children Felix and Fanny were born, the family had converted to Lutheranism. So Felix grew up considering himself Lutheran, although certainly years later during the Third Reich, his music was banned in Hitler's Germany. The pieces I'm going to play for you are 7 of his Lieder ohne Worte, or songs without words. There was a real market in 19th century Europe for short piano works. Every middle-class household owned a piano, it seemed at least every young woman took piano lessons, and there was an enormous market for short works. And different composers gave their short pieces different kinds of titles. Schubert talked about impromptus, Brahms used the title intermezzo, Mendelssohn liked the title songs without words. The nicknames for them, which you'll see in the program, were by and large given by later publishers. But I guess they were given because people like some kind of an image to hold on to. But here are 7 of Mendelssohn songs without. So the microphone held its own. All right, is it being picked up still? Okay. I understand there was some cello music by Ernst Bloch performed here the other night. And Ernst Bloch, who was Swiss-born but emigrated like so many Jewish composers of the 20th century to the United States, I believe that he taught at one point at UC Berkeley. He was also in New York City at the Manners College of Music. And as the other night's program demonstrated, he was concerned with expressing his Jewish identity in music. Although not especially in this set of pieces I'm going to play for you now. These are his Poems of the Sea. It's a set of 3 works which strike me as being much indebted to the French Impressionists in their harmonic language, although to my ear, the modality of many of the melodies does recall Jewish liturgical music. The collection is prefaced by part of a poem by Walt Whitman that I will read for you now. It's from his poem In Cabined Ships. So the verse goes, in cabined ships at sea, the boundless blue on every side expanding, with whistling winds and music of the waves, the large imperious waves, or some lone bark buoyed on the dense marine. We're joyous, full of faith, spreading white sails. She cleaves the ether mid the sparkle and the foam of day, and under many a star at night. By sailors young and old, haply will I, a reminiscence of the land, be read in full rapport at last. So those sailors at sea reading Walt Whitman's poetry, here are his 3 Poems of the Sea. Darius Milhaud is a name that may be familiar to locals. Darius Milhaud, I believe, was honorary president of the Academy of the West in the late 1940s and taught in California at Mill College at one point. He was French-born. He's often labeled one of these 6 composers, 5 French, 1 Swiss, referred to by Jean Cocteau as les six. And these were composers like Milhaud, Francis Poulenc, and others who were committed to sort of deflating music in the early 20th century of its Germanic romantic pretensions. So they sort of set about writing music that would have almost a willfully popular and even banal character, kind of like an analogy to the Dada movement in early 20th century art. So during the First World War, Milhaud spent some time in Brazil, and his 10 Saudades do Brasil are his tribute to Brazilian nightclub music. I'm going to play 3 of them for you now. One of the things that musicologists like to call attention to in these pieces is the use of bitonality, which means that you often have a melody in one key and an accompaniment in another key. So he takes what could be pretty conventional with and makes it kind of sexy. So here are 3 of Milhaud's Saudades do Brasil. And the reference to the Academy of the West reminds me of my former teacher, Jerry Lowenthal, whom I want to make sure to acknowledge, who turned 90 this past week and marked the occasion with a recital of Opus 90s by various composers. But he reminded me of the connection with Mio and Santa Barbara. So next are three works by New York-born composer of Jewish descent, George Gershwin. There's a story that the French composer Maurice Ravel came to New York in the 1920s and was fascinated by American jazz, went to jazz clubs in Harlem and met young George Gershwin at a party. And George Gershwin was interested in taking lessons from Ravel on the art of orchestration and approached him. And apparently Ravel said to Gershwin, how much do you make a year from your composing? And Gershwin said, 100, 200,000. And Ravel said, then I should be coming to you for the lessons, and never taught him. But the anecdote also shows that Gershwin, as his relatively short life went on, was more and more interested in making a mark as a serious composer of classical music and not just as a writer of Broadway hits. And it's ironic that for one of the greatest pianists of the 20th century, he only published these three short works. Apparently, he had the ambition of writing a set of 24 preludes, like Chopin had done, like Debussy had done, like Bach had done. And he got as far as 6, which he premiered at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan in 1926. And he chose these 3 for publication. So Gershwin's only published solo piano music. third of those Gershwin preludes is sometimes nicknamed the Spanish prelude because it has a quintessentially Latin American rhythm. And it speaks to the fascination on the part of many American composers in the early 20th century with Latin jazz. And this is the case with the work I'm going to play for you now. Aaron Copland's El Salón Mexico, which takes its title from a popular nightclub in Mexico City that Copland used to frequent in the 1930s. It's an orchestral work. This is an arrangement for piano by Leonard Bernstein, his younger colleague. And to my ears, it's hard to imagine that he could have composed West Side Story without the influence of this work, but you can decide for yourselves. Now for the only music on tonight's program with an overtly Jewish theme. These are two of Detroit-born composer Paul Schoenfield's, two of his 6 improvisations on Hasidic themes. The first is nigun, which I believe is a Hebraic term for song. And the second, kozache, which maybe someone can enlighten me. I think it's some kind of a Eastern European dance, but I have not been able to. It seems very lively on the basis of what he did with it. So two of Paul Schoenfield, who grew up, by the way, on a kibbutz, but two of his improvisations on Hasidic themes. Of course, the greatest composer for the piano was the Polish-born Frédéric Chopin. But Chopin was a rabid anti-Semite, so I won't be including any of his music. Instead, Poland is represented by another Polish composer who emigrated to Paris, Moritz Moszkowski, one of the great composers of piano music, really someone whose understanding of the instrument and how to write idiomatically for it ranks with Chopin or Franz Liszt. So these are two of his works. The first, La Jongleuse, or the Juggler Woman, and the second, a tribute to Spain, is Caprice Espagnol. I will play one more for you. This with Spain in mind, as that last piece evokes. Cordoba, the birthplace of Maimonides, the great medieval Jewish philosopher, and in the Middle Ages, a place where Jews, Arabs, Christians lived together in relative harmony, the so-called convivencia. So this is a tribute to the Andalusian city, Cordoba, by Isaac Almenis.